got you all.
A very good morning and welcome to Ireland AM. It is Sunday and it is someone's birthday around here. No idea where we're playing that music. Any ideas, Elaine?
I am old. I shall wear the bottoms
Here we go.
of my
We're going to put on the glasses.
Oh, what are you doing?
Look what we have here. Oh, no, this has to be done now. Here. Ah, it's the birthday girl.
Oh, you punctured my bosom.
What a way to start a Sunday morning, eh? Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to have you
What
here
age are
with
you?
me. I am, do you know what? I'm 47.
Okay, I was going to say never ask a
47.
lady her age. But
I'm not a lady, so you're
she
grand.
ain't no lady.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very sweet of you and kind, and I'm mortified anyway. But yes, another day older, another day wiser.
Absolutely.
I'm not wiser, am I?
No, you're not. Definitely not.
Anyway, we'll stop embarrassing me now. Ooh. And scene. Now, coming up today, we look at the big stories making the Sunday papers, including news that the threat level of attacks by violent extremists on politicians has been raised by the Garda Commissioner.
Absolutely. And in sport, Arsenal and Liverpool got their seasons off to a flyer yesterday. We look back at the opening Saturday of the Premier League season.
With the World Health Organization declaring Mpox a global public health emergency, we'll be finding out what you need to know about the virus.
And happy Kylie Day to all who celebrate before she takes to the main stage at EP later on this evening. The field last night. I came back from the forest.
What field? What field?
I was down in Stravell.
I'm glad you clarified
I'm a
that
little
one.
bit delicate this morning.
I was getting...
You know what? It took me about 10 minutes, 20 minutes to get my band off. So.
Yeah. I was getting text messages at midnight going, yoo-hoo, I'm electric picnic. I was like, oh no, I'm going to be in the
Is he
show
going to
on
show
my
up?
own. But
Anyway, here I am.
Full of beans.
Yeah.
And ahead of a new documentary charting her extraordinary life and career, I catch up with the living legend that is former President Mary Robinson.
You need to be chilled to handle Irish weather. That's why Chill sponsor weather updates on Virgin Media One.
This afternoon we can expect dry conditions across most of the country, apart from a few passing light showers. Temperatures will range between 16 and 20 degrees. This evening we'll see any mist patches clear, with temperatures ranging between 16 and 19 degrees. And tonight will become cloudy with patchy rain and drizzle spreading from the southwest. Overnight temperatures will range between 12 and 16 degrees.
You need to be chilled to handle Irish weather. That's why Chill sponsor weather updates on Virgin Media One.
First check on your Sunday paper, starting with the front page of the Sunday Independent. Its headline reads, O'Gorman to resist legal bill by survivors of baby homes. It goes on to report that Children's Minister Roderick O'Gorman will contest a series of legal challenges taken by former mother and baby home residents aimed at forcing the government to broaden eligibility of the redress scheme for survivors.
Next up on the front of the Business Post this morning, it leads with Bank of Ireland faces battle over €500 million crash era pension curbs. It writes that Bank of Ireland has rejected calls to lift crisis era curbs that significantly restrict the pension benefits of more than 5,000 former staff in a deepening row over more than €500 million.
The Sunday Times leads with risk of attack by right-wing extremists in Ireland is substantial. It reports that the Garda Commissioner, Drew Harris, has increased the threat level posed by violent political extremists from moderate to substantial, meaning that an attack is likely following an upsurge in threats to kill members of the government and opposition parties by far-right extremists.
On to the tabloids next, and the Irish Mail on Sunday leads with priest stabbing accused has ISIS mindset. The paper writes that a teenager appeared in court yesterday charged in connection with the stabbing of an army chaplain in Galway City.
The Irish Sunday Mirror opens with boy charged over priest stabbing. It reports that the teen was charged with assault causing harm to Father Friar Paul Murphy, who was injured in Renmore Barracks in County Galway on Thursday.
The Sunday World puts cartels jailbait on its front page. It writes that 3 cartel hitmen and the Kinahan's top man in Portlaoise prison joined forces to dole out a savage beating to a violent criminal in a day of chaos at the high security lockup.
The Sun on Sunday opens with Barry and Sabrina love split. The paper writes that pop star Sabrina Carpenter has broken up with Barry Keoghan after becoming fed up with his party lifestyle.
Now, if you've been tuned in to Virgin Media Television right across the week, you'll have seen that Specsavers has released the list of the most commonly misheard phrases that we use in Ireland, which they've dubbed the Misheard Manifesto.
I'm always mishearing things.
I'm your sister here in this one because I'm the same.
So tell us about this misheard manifesto.
Okay, so there's lots of ones that have popped up.
Okay.
Throughout the campaign, right? So first up, the first one we have here, right? We'll just yes. Now.
Okay, right. Here we have it. We have the list in front of us now. We can do it.
We do, right. So the first one is scapegoat or scapegoat.
A scapegoat or scapegoat. No, I get scapegoat. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So 63% say it's scapegoat. But is it actually a scapegoat?
It's not a scapegoat,
No,
Deric.
it's a scapegoat. It's a scapegoat, correct, yes.
Yeah,
but 37% of people are actually wrong here on this.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So what do you hear? You hear scapegoat.
No. Okay, I see scapegoat, you see scapegoat. If you scan the QR code there now, lads, right, what you can do is let us know what you think, because that's one of the commonly misheard
Okay, we'll go on to
the
next one.
We have more here
Yeah,
as well.
we have more here, right.
No, nip it in the butt or nip it in the bud. What would you say?
I'd say nip it in the bud.
Good.
Yeah, is that right?
Good. It is. I think so, yes.
I was nipped in the butt last night.
I'm glad by a goat, a wandering... I don't... Anyway.
There's 85,000 people down there. It's nip it in the bud. Nip it in the bud, right, okay.
Duct tape or duct tape?
Well, I hear duct tape, but it's duct tape. But I hear duct tape.
Wiggle room or wriggle room?
I would say wriggle, because that would be grammatically...
Wiggle.
No, it's wriggle.
It's wiggle.
No, it's wriggle.
It's wiggle.
It's wriggle room.
It's wriggle room. This is my favourite one. Tenterhooks or tenderhooks?
Okay, so I know what it is, but I say the other one. So I know it's tenterhooks, but I do say tenderhooks.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Tenterhooks.
Okay, I say tenderhooks.
Tenderhooks.
Tenderhook.
That's probably what happened to you last night when you got nipped in the butt.
There you go. We'll give the result. Wonder products here this morning. Anyway, we'll have the results after the break, right?
Yeah, we will indeed, yeah. Stay with us now. We're looking at the big stories and making this morning's front pages after this short break.
It's tenterhooks. Tenterhooks. All right, Fáilte Rash, welcome back to Ireland Daily. Now, before the break, we asked you to let us know how you hear the common phrase scapegoat or a scapegoat. Well, we have the results in and we can reveal that 87%, take a look there on air, you hear scapegoat, while 13% of you hear a scapegoat. Oh, it's changed on air there. It's gone up to 88. Look, so 12% of you are actually wrong, just like Elaine Crowley, the birthday girl. Over to you.
Excuse me, you will find I was right, Deric Hartigan.
You were right all the time.
I was right. I said scapegoat, not a scapegoat.
I'm winding you up on your birthday.
I know. Well, you Mr. Tenterhooks over there. Anyway, thanks for that, Deric. Sure, we're having the crack here this morning. Now, Lauren Boland of the Journal and communications expert Barry McLaughlin have joined me to talk through the big stories and making today's Sunday papers. And we'll start with the Sunday Times this morning. Barry, attack by right-wing extremists. The story there brings us through that in the Times.
Yeah, essentially, the Garda Commissioner and the Crime and Security Intelligence Service within Garda Síochána have essentially raised the threat. They now see right-wing extremists as a greater threat than, say, jihad or Republican terrorism in this country. To be honest with you, looking at everything that's been going on the last couple of months, you look at the threats. We've since heard that were issued to Leo Varadkar. We've seen what's happened with the current Taoiseach at the moment. You see what's happening up and down the country. You see unlikely groups of people joining forces and marching. It's no surprise that with all this activity, we're seeing that this happening and going on. Now, the Guards are very clear to point out that the threat still remains moderate, but there's definitely been an increase in activity. There's definitely been an increase in terms of what people are seeing happening on the streets, happening in our towns and villages. And I think one of the big things about it is, and it's covered in the story as well, is that it's so easy for people to mobilise really quickly. People from all walks of life, social media has been used, and it seems to be the case that these things can happen really, really quickly. And we were just chatting beforehand as well, like there's lots of stories up and down the country of misinformation. People put out a rumour, then people mobilise, people are protesting. It's an opportunity then for people to express their views in somewhat violent terms. And if we just look what's happened in the UK in the last couple of weeks as well, the people who've been caught and prosecuted, You've got people as young as 15 or 16. You've got people who maybe necessarily haven't come to police attention before. That's what a lot of these groups do. They get a lot of people involved, and it's people without the criminal records that end up paying the price.
Yeah, and an 11-year-old up north as well was arrested. I mean, questioned. It was absolutely horrific when you look at it. And as well, if you look what's happening up north and translated loosely somewhat down south, when you see a tricolour next to a Union Jack, at an anti-immigration protest, I mean, in a traditional area that would never have those two units together. You see how this kind of nationalism almost is being hijacked.
That's right, and you remember there was a protest outside Garda headquarters about 10 days ago, and the protesters turned on each other.
Yeah.
You know, so you can just see even within the groups that the Garda are monitoring, there's huge splits as well.
Yeah, but it just seems when any of these protests, and there's a lot of people who have legitimate concerns, and of course they're legitimately allowed to protest, and many are doing so peacefully, which is fair enough. But you have the extremists, Lauren, which is what they're talking about here, and they are they're the ones, the threats, they're the ones being arrested. And if you look at what's happening in the UK, there's a zero tolerance with it over there, and I suppose we would have to look at that happening here as well if Drew Harris is in fact flagging it so seriously.
Yeah, because it is extremism. The Guardian have said that they were monitoring discussions by some of these extremists around plans to assassinate Leo Varadkar when he was Taoiseach, which is really alarming stuff. I mean, no matter where your political views stand, that kind of stuff is just, it feels silly to even have to say it, but it's obviously unacceptable. And I think, talking about that sort of mobilisation on social media, I think we can trace some of this back to sort of COVID and the kind of the online groups that we saw emerge around that time, the sort of platforming of, sort of maybe anti-science or anti-authority kind of views, and sort of capitalising on conspiracy theories and making people sceptical of the government, and kind of playing on people's fears a lot of the time.
People who refuse to wear masks at those COVID protests are the ones wearing masks now in a lot of cases, which is quite interesting.
And that sort of, that kind of, now the COVID has gone away as a kind of something to mobilise around a lot of those communities, if you want to call them that kind of mobilised around that issue, now still exist and have these platforms where they can communicate each other and recruit other people to radicalise people online. That's what's happening.
Yeah. And I was one other point as well. We have an election upcoming as well. This will be at the forefront of some politicians' minds as well. As you're knocking on doors, going around, visibly being a politician. What does this actually mean for you as well, whether you're in government or in opposition?
Yeah, and it will take, they'll have to show a very strong line really to separate the extremists from those who legitimately are protesting. And we have so many people, as you said, innocent people who are getting caught up by this rhetoric that they're being thrown at online, and this misinformation everywhere, and they're getting caught in the crosshairs here.
I think at the same time, though, everyone has to take a bit of responsibility now. We know what happens at sometimes this kind of protest, the arson attacks. So if somebody is making a decision to go to one of these protests, they have to know, they know sort of, I think at this point, what they're potentially getting into. I think people do need to sort of take a bit of responsibility for their actions. And
there's another story as well. The government is exploring whether or not it can cancel the passport of one Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson, who in fairness is a big donkey. I'm sorry for using that, but actually no, he's not a donkey. Donkeys are lovely because he's just a disgusting individual in any way, shape or form. He's stoking all this from wherever he is in the world. He's been detained in Canada and this is how they came to our attention here. But I mean, looking seriously at cancelling his so-called Irish passport, he claims he's born here and he's an Irish citizen.
I think the question is, who is Tommy Robinson? Because he has so many aliases, so many different names. I suppose technically the rule that gave us people like Tony Cascarino and John Aldridge, the grandparent rule, is the rule that would allow him to apply for and have an Irish passport, and that's something the government are looking at the moment as well. It's very interesting because his argument would be, when he is caught out, he feels he's been victimised, he's been challenged on certain things, but then he would want the same rules applied to the people that he's criticising as well. So it's something definitely going to look at, but you're absolutely right. You'll never see him in the front line. You'll see him far away, commenting, speaking.
Stoking.
He's not the guy who's going to be picked up at the end of the day.
And of course, you can cancel an Irish passport if it is in the interest of public safety and security, either at home or abroad. So, I mean, I think he's right up there with that. Pull it from ASAP, I say. Another story in the paper today concerns Roderick O'Gorman. Tell us about that. So this is in relation to the redress scheme that's been set up for survivors of mother and baby homes, and it's the one that was set up in the wake of the 2021 Commission of Inquiry. And basically what we've seen since that redress scheme was first announced is that it's been roundly criticised by survivors, particularly for being too narrow, that it's not inclusive enough of everybody who did suffer under that system. And what we're seeing now is that there is
is going to be a series of legal challenges brought against the government over how this redress scheme has been handled. And the first one of these now coming up is around that lack of inclusivity. So what we know is that I think only 14 mother and baby homes that were included in the Commission of Inquiry are now being included in the redress scheme, and then another, I think, 30 state-run county homes are being included in that. And then also only children who spent more than 180 days are being included in the scheme. So if you spent less than 6 months, you're not eligible for the scheme. But obviously that doesn't account for the trauma that somebody endured throughout their life, even if if they were there for less than 6 months, the way that can have so many knock-on impacts on their life.
And I think as well, we were just chatting about earlier, I mean, like, if you look at this particular group of people, I mean, they've been fighting for well over 30 years. They were left out of the original redress scheme back in 2002. They took long and hard campaigning to get to the point where they've been not even compensated, it's redress. Compensation is a very different thing. I think if you're somebody who, from a very young age, were excluded or marginalised, this is very hard to bear. So we're looking at 24,000 people who are being told right now under the current scheme cannot apply. 34,000 people have applied, are entitled to some sort of payment. So the people who will want to be included in this are very motivated. They've nothing to lose. So it'll be really interesting to see where the government end up with this. At the end of the day, the government would take the view we have to limit the state's exposure, save money or whatever. The victims would feel that, we're not being treated equally or fairly, and this has been going on all of our lives. So it'll be interesting to see when the courts reach a decision in October. Hopefully we'll have a better idea what's going to happen then.
And finally for today, we have to look at the Gaza talks in relation to a ceasefire there. And the US, who's a very strong Israeli ally, they are pushing for the Qatar talks to succeed. The death toll has peaked, and at least 40,000 now that we know of. Bombings continuing throughout yesterday. Some very distressing scenes again, Lauren. I mean, what are your thoughts on this, the hopes of this?
Yeah, so on the talks, I suppose they're due to continue now this week, and Joe Biden has come out on the US side to say that there's been progress, but that the sides need to, come to an agreement on it. A spokesperson for Hamas said that they felt that the US was sort of pushing a deal that would have favoured the Israeli side and kind of is bringing in compromises that are what the Israeli side has wanted, and that they're not content with that. Israel came out and said that there's been sort of positive and progress in the talks, the kind of the language we've seen around it a lot of time, but essentially no sort of we've seen these talks going on now for months and months and months, and there hasn't been any significant breakthroughs. So still sort of waiting for that to happen, and at the same time the US is trying to warn Iran not to take any action that could further risk those talks.
As they sell billions in arms to Israel.
Yeah, and I think it's like any negotiation, everyone will want to feel they're walking away with something. And I think the fact that the Israelis have expressed satisfaction would raise issues with the Hamas leadership. Now, we know from the report from CNN that the Hamas leadership actually haven't seen the final deal yet, so it'll be interesting to see what they look at and what they view as well. So these are the people who are actually in Gaza at the moment. But as you said, I mean, 40,000 people we know have been killed.
Horrific scenes. More
bombs dropped in that part of the world than anywhere ever. It beats anything that happened during the Second World War, Vietnam War. So, I mean, there is so little now that else can be done in terms of militarily. This seems to be the only option. And if Joe Biden is right and something happens and there is a deal, it'll look very, very good from him in his as he's going out in his twilight. But
you'd wonder. His nickname now is Genocide Joe. A lot across a lot of people in the States now. I mean, his legacy in relation to that is not great. But then again, when we look at what's going on over there, I mean, it's utterly horrific. And of course, we have to remember, from our point of view, more journalists have been killed in Gaza than in any other conflict in modern times. It's absolutely frightening. Thank you both so much for joining us on the show this morning. Now, Arne Slot got his Liverpool reign off to a winning start yesterday. We'll talk about it in the rest of the morning's big sports stories after this short break.
What you need to know about Mpox. We're back after this quick break.
You're very welcome back to Ireland AM. Now, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control has raised its risk level for Mpox.
Yes, that's following Sweden's report of the first case outside Africa where the outbreak has already claimed hundreds of lives in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Joining us now to discuss this further is Assistant Professor of Microbiology at Trinity College, Dr. Kim Roberts. Kim, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Now, this is all about a new strain. Can you explain what it is and how it differs from perhaps the outbreak in 2022?
Yeah, sure. So Mpox is a type of pox virus that naturally infects a range of different small mammals in Central and West Africa. So it doesn't naturally infect humans. The pox virus that used to infect humans was smallpox, and that was eradicated in 1980. So smallpox no longer circulates and infects us. But Mpox is found naturally within a range of small mammals, and occasionally it will spill over into the human population when people have close interactions with infected animals. Mpox is able to transmit from person to person, and so you get these outbreaks of Mpox within human populations, and those outbreaks have been increasing over the last decade or so. We can split Mpox viruses into different clades based on their genetic information. So that genetic information is the stuff that encodes how the virus replicates, how it infects people.
So what's a clade?
So a clade is just how we split the viruses into different genetic characteristic
different
groups.
Strains of
so
it, kind
it's
of. Yeah.
Sort of different strains, different groupings that are very, very similar, but they're just different enough genetically that they can have different characteristics.
Okay.
So for Mpox, there is clade 1 and clade 2, and those can then be subdivided into A and B.
So, Kim, how serious is it in terms of the spread of it, and what are the potential risks then to health?
So one of the things that's concerning about this clade 1b Mpox virus is that it is spreading fairly rapidly within the DRC, and there have been more cases to date this year than all of last year of Mpox. So it's spreading pretty rapidly within a specific geographical area. Clade 1 viruses tend to be more severe, cause more severe symptoms and have a higher risk of death than the clade 2 viruses. And it was the clade 2 virus that caused the outbreak in 2022. So the outbreak that we're more familiar with, where there were cases all around the world, is considered to be a slightly more mild case of Mpox than the one that's causing the concern at the moment.
How concerned should we be that it has now been identified in Northern Europe, in Sweden, and there's an elevated risk now that has been flagged around us?
So I think we're aware from the last few years that viruses travel via international travel. So there will be cases in Europe, in America, of this virus where people have been exposed to the virus in one of the main areas in DRC or the neighbouring countries, and then carry that virus to other countries and potentially transmit to other people in a small cluster. But the aim of raising the risk threat to a public health emergency of international concern is so that all health authorities are aware of it, doctors are receiving lots of information so that they can identify it. It's being, contact tracing will take place to reduce chains of transmission. So the risk level is still low outside of the DRC and the main countries affected.
So in the general population here, the risk is low, it's just certain demographics are more prone, more susceptible to being infected?
Potentially. So obviously people who are travelling to areas where there's a lot of infection are at greater risk of being exposed to the virus. And certain people are potentially more likely to get a more severe infection. So somebody who's immunocompromised, pregnant people and young children are more at risk of having more severe disease. But the risk, it's a very, very noticeable rash that occurs with Mpox. And so identifying that rash and then having the infected person isolated until that rash is fully healed, which can take 4 weeks, that's the best way.
How long can it take?
It can take up to 4 weeks
4
for the
weeks
rash
to be
to
fully
heal.
healed. Wow.
Because so the symptoms of Mpox, it starts off with the sort of symptoms that you get with a virus infection when your body's fighting off a virus. So you get a fever, you get a headache, you get achy limbs, but then it forms this characteristic rash. and they're quite large lesions, and it might just be in the site of infection, so it could be localised to a particular area.
Would it be quite itchy?
Could be quite itchy, can be very painful, but it can also be throughout the body, depending on the type of exposure that somebody has. The spots can also occur inside the mouth, inside the nose, in the throat, so it can be very, very painful. Yeah, and most of the transmission of the virus comes from the virus that's occurring in those spots, and so somebody is infectious until they are all healed.
So, Kim, how does it transfer then person to person?
So by close contact. So household transmission occurs, and you also get transmission through sexual networks. So most transmission occurs through skin-to-skin contact. So we can have microabrasions on our skin, and the virus can get in that way. So, for example, people who have eczema or other skin conditions can be more susceptible to infection. It can be transmitted through respiratory secretions, but you're talking close contact for prolonged periods of time.
If you've had an Mpox vaccination before, will you need a booster now?
So the regime for the Mpox vaccination is 2 doses. And if you've had both of those doses, then that should cover you for several years. So this is for people who have received the vaccine since the 2022 outbreak. They should be covered if they've had both of the doses. But obviously, anybody needs to follow the medical advice.
But obviously, consult your GP.
Exactly, consult your GP. And if somebody thinks that they've been exposed or sees an unusual rash, then obviously go seek medical help. And
we don't want to scaremonger either. Like we think of something like this and the panic of COVID and global pandemic. Are we looking at that sort of situation here now?
So it's always really difficult to predict into the future with viruses because it's dependent on so many different factors, both kind of the biological of the virus, but also the political factors as well. One of the things that I think is really reassuring is that the World Health Organization has raised this threat level at this point, which means that resources are freed up to get to the areas where it's needed. So it means that more vaccine doses hopefully will be able to go to DRC and neighbouring countries so that they can control the outbreak there and limit onwards transmission to other countries. And it's freeing up that money, freeing up those resources and supplies, you know, I think will be what's going to be able to control this outbreak.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning with all that information. And of course, if you would like to know any more on this, please visit hsc.ie.
Absolutely. Now, still to come, ahead of her headlining performance at EP tonight, we're taking a closer look at the music and pop culture impact of Miss Kylie and Minogue. Looking forward to this one.
Do you have your gold hot pants?
Absolutely. See you in a few. I'm teaching Elaine how to dance.
It's not going very well, let me.
She spilled coffee all over her new dress.
Oh, for God's sake, why are you telling everybody this? I can't tell them anything. I was over the sink trying to wash it off there. You can't really tell, can you?
She was.
Yeah, anyway. Happy Kylie Day to all celebrating at Electric Picnic. We're not there, we're here.
No,
anyway.
I will be there. I'll be there later on.
Well, I won't be
I'll
there.
be frolicking around the fields in leash. Are you coming?
You can frolic on your own.
Okay.
I have mental images of you now frolicking in fields and leash now that I
I've
didn't
got
really
my
need.
hot pants ready.
And she's set to take to the stage at 10:30 tonight in what's set to be an amazing show. I don't have any FOMO at all, but for now, you're waking up to yet another amazing show. Yeah, that's us here.
Yes, now, coming up a little bit later on, we're looking back on the career and pop culture impact of the Princess of Pop.
Also coming up today, we're chatting to the team that has brought home over 30 gold medals this season at the Transplant and Dialysis Championships in Lisbon.
You know their medals are made out of spuds, by the way. Anyway, you'll find out later on. Anyway, ahead of
Are
the
you
release.
joking?
No, I'm not. Ahead of the release of the movie celebrating her former life, former president, in fact, Mary Robinson, tells us about her extraordinary career and how she still fights for a better world. What an amazing woman.
Oh, she's do you know what? I was so intimidated when I was interviewing her. I was all really nervous for the first time doing an interview in ages.
Were you?
She's so amazing.
Yeah, she is. And a Mayo woman as well.
Okay, we won't hold that against her.
No.
No. And oh la la, in fashion, we're taking a trip to the City of Lights to steal the style style of Emily in Paris.
Yeah, gorgeous. Now, Tommy Butler is looking after our bellies today. What's cooking good looking?
Right. So we're going to cook a bacon chop this morning. People are probably cooking up rashers and sausage now at the moment. We're going to do a bacon chop with a little bit of funky pineapple and chilli relish.
Now let's check again on your Sunday paper, starting with the front page of the Sunday Independent. Its headline reads, O'Gorman to resist legal bid by survivors of baby homes. It goes on to report that Children's Minister Roderick O'Gorman will contest a series of legal challenges taken by former mother and baby home residents aimed at forcing the government to broaden eligibility of the redress scheme for survivors.
Next up on the front of the Business Post this morning, it leads with Bank of Ireland faces battle over €500 million crash-era pension curbs. It writes that Bank of Ireland has rejected calls to lift crisis-era curbs that significantly restrict the pension benefits of more than 5,000 former staff in a deepening row over more than €500 million.
The Sunday Times leads with risk of attack by right-wing extremists in Ireland is substantial. It reports that the Garda Commissioner Drew Harris has increased the threat level posed by violent political extremists from moderate to substantial, meaning that an attack is likely following an upsurge in threats to kill members of the government and opposition parties by far-right extremists.
On to the tabloids next, and the Irish Mail on Sunday leads with the priest stabbing accused has ISIS mindset. The paper writes that a teenager appeared in court yesterday charged in connection with the stabbing of an army chaplain in Galway City.
The Irish Sunday Mirror opens with boy charged over priest stabbing. It reports that the teen charged with assault causing harm to Father Paul Murphy, who was injured in Renmore Barracks in County Galway on Thursday.
Next up, the Sunday World puts cartels jail bait on its front page. It writes that 3 cartel hitmen and the Kinahan's top man in Portlaoise prison joined forces to dole out a savage beating to a violent criminal in a day of chaos at the high security lockup.
The Sun on Sunday opens with Barry and Sabrina love split. The paper writes that pop star Sabrina Carpenter has broken up with Barry Keoghan after becoming fed up with his party lifestyle.
Now, there's lots of texts coming in. First up, we're talking Electric Picnic. And Glenda says, I've been following Kylie since I bought her album aged 8 in 1987. She's been around that long and I'm finally getting to see her at EP. And it's my first festival. Go on, Glenda.
Aoife says, Derek, do you have a pair of gold hot pants? And will we see them at Electric Picnic? Like, you did say you would be frolicking around the field in Stradbally later on.
I do, and I have them on now.
No, it actually wouldn't surprise me.
Stop it. Anyway, Elaine, there's a lot of love in for you this morning. Nari says, happy birthday, Elaine. Enjoy your special day. Love when you're on the show. So does Michael. Says, you look stunning this morning, as gorgeous as ever. Breda says, happy birthday, Elaine. Someone else says, oh yes. Aoife says, oh look, you don't look a day over 47 and we have a Cork and Millet.
Oh, thank you, Gracie.
Oh, look at that.
Thank you.
Cork colours.
You did, and my first name is Rose, and you put roses on it. You're so sweet. Thank you.
Is your name really Rose?
Yeah, Rose Elaine.
Is it?
A rose by any other name. Smell me. That's just my sweet.
That's very rosy.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you, Chris. Thank you, my sweet. Thank you. That's very kind of you.
You don't look a day over 21.
Oh, you lie like a cheap-rug, but thank you.
No, come here.
So
Molly
boring.
says, Elaine, you don't look a day over 47. I didn't even think you were 40.
You're not 47.
She is 47.
Yeah.
You look beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Gorgeous.
I'll take it. I'll take anything
So,
I can
make
get
a
now.
wish.
Okay.
Has anyone sung you happy birthday yet?
Happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Elaine. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much.
So be sure to take the flowers home.
I will, of course. You're so
You
kind.
can put
Thank
them
you
in
so much, Chris.
Oh,
Right, get a knife, let's start eating.
A spoon. We need a spoon.
I'll leave it to you for
A spoon, all
And
right.
lads, even the crew sang happy birthday to me.
You feeling
they're
special?
So sweet. I'm
She is
feeling-
so lovely.
I always feel special, but I'm feeling more special today. Thank you so much. You're very kind. Bring a
course,
tear
of
to a
course.
silly little old lady's eye.
I'll leave this here
Less
for
of the
you.
old now. We'll keep the cynical, less of the old. Mature.
All right.
All right, I'm
okay.
going to leave the cake here for you so you can admire it.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
thank you
delicious.
So much. Now, what are we doing now? We're going to a break. I'll discombobulate later. Lots more to come between now and noon. Probably embarrassing me a little bit more. Do stay tuned.
Right, let's tuck into
Here
this.
we go.
Very welcome back to R&M Fáilte Rash. Now, our next guests have just brought home 31 gold, 22 silver and 12 bronze medals at the European Transplant Sports Championships held in Lisbon last month. An incredible achievement.
Absolutely amazing. And joining us in studio are Transplant Sport Ireland team manager and kidney recipient Harry Ward, liver recipient Mike Johan and double lung recipient Victor Conroy. Thanks all of you for joining us on the show this morning. Harry, first I'll go to you. So tell us about this spectacular achievement. There's some clatter of medals you got.
It is some clatter of medals we got. There was 25 athletes took part in over 20 probably different sports. All of your sport is, you know, same sports as in the Olympics. We can do darts, athletics, swimming, table tennis. There's a variety of sports. Some there to suit everybody. There's petanque, which I play myself. It's, you know, similar to the French boules. So it's a skill game probably more than you have to think. But it's there, and it's one of the most popular games coming up now in it. As I said, we had a team of 24 athletes, and we brought home that haul of medals. They don't give you the medals. We have to win them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a great achievement.
I mean, you must have been inspired looking at the Olympics as well, all the sporting atmosphere around at home and abroad. Like, incredible, really, isn't it?
Well, I think Deric, they were inspired looking at us.
Yeah, absolutely,
you know?
yeah.
I think we showed them the way.
Yeah.
You came home with more medals anyway.
They're trying to keep up with us.
Yeah.
It is. It's
tell us a bit about Transplant Sport Ireland, though. I mean, what is it for everyone with a transplant? Can anyone take part? Is there a level for everyone?
Anybody can take part. People on dialysis can take part too, and I would highly recommend anyone on dialysis to come and get involved. Transplant Sport Ireland was Transplant Team Ireland, which the Kidney Association set up about 26 years ago. But because of COVID, things changed, and now the Transplant Sport Ireland is run by all volunteers, and we're all transplanted, with the exception of our person in media, lady Dee. She's Mike's wife. She does all our media. But the rest of us are all transplanted.
Mike, how many of you went over to Lisbon, and how did it go for you over there then?
It went very well, Deric. There was 25 athletes, and we brought supporters with families, about 40, 45 supporters. It was a lovely week. Lisbon is a beautiful city. The people were fantastic there. Now, it was very warm.
Yeah, you were telling me about 35 degrees.
Oh, it went up to 38, 39 degrees.
Very hot.
I remember going training in the track on the Wednesday, and I had to stop after a few minutes. It was so hot. But luckily then towards the end of the week, when the athletics were kicking in, where I was competing, the shot put, the discus and the race walk, the 5K race walk, the temperatures dropped to about 30 degrees. So we were quite happy with that and quite relieved with that. But it was a tough challenge, but it was a fantastic week.
And Mike, you have a whole range of sports as well. So very similar to the Olympics. Yes. You have everything. And actually you have squash as well, I believe.
We have squash. We do.
Which the Olympics don't have until LA.
The Olympics don't have. As I said to you, we don't have breakdancing yet, but you'd never know.
Or skateboarding.
Or skateboarding. But our next venture will be next year. The World Games are in Dresden, and there's archery coming into it for the first time. And that's going to be another new sport again for us. And we're looking forward to getting athletes involved in all the sports that are available to us.
Now, you've been on the show before in 2018. You've had a huge success since then, Mike. But for those who probably may not have watched back then, tell us your story and how you became to be involved in this.
Well, back in 1993, when I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with a condition called autoimmune hepatitis. And that's a condition where your body attacks and destroys your own liver. So I was on medication for about 14 years until about 2005. My health deteriorated very quickly then, and the next 2.5 years was very, very difficult. I was in and out of hospital the whole time. Then in about the autumn of 2007, I was in St. Vincent's above in the liver unit, and my consultant came in and says, look, we've given you 14 years now with this condition, it's time for a transplant. So they put me on the transplant list in the middle of December. And because of the severity of my disease at that time, and I was very sick, they put me to the top of the list. And they gave me about 8 weeks to live if I didn't receive a transplant. Luckily for me, I got the call 11 days later. Wow. Went down to surgery, everything went well. The first 3 or 4 days was very good, no issues whatsoever. Unfortunately, on day 5, I wasn't feeling very well. Then I went into a rejection, and my body was rejecting the transplanted liver that I got. They scale rejection from 0 to 9. My rejection was 8.5, so I was very close. Oh, very, very sick.
Yeah.
The next 4 to 5 weeks was very difficult, but with the help of the great team in St. Vincent's and the treatment, eventually my body started to accept the liver, the rejection process started to pass, and within the next 2 to 3 weeks, I was home. That was February of 2008. I left Vincent's. It's now August 2024, and I've not been back into Vincent's Hospital since.
Amazing
It's
story.
been a great success story.
Medicine is amazing.
Unbelievable. But the key thing here is my donor and all the donors and people who, want to commit to organ donation and support organ donation. Because without organ donation, neither of the three of us would be sitting in this couch here this morning. I'm 17 years transplanted nearly, Harry's 17 years transplanted, Victor is about 7 years transplanted, so that's over 40 years of extra living.
Between the three of you.
Yeah.
And we're always there. And this is the one thing about the sports team is we're promoting, organ donation through sports. And we're trying to encourage people to have the conversation and say yes to organ donation. That's the key.
Victor, I suppose that a lot of people think once you are that sick and you have to have a transplant, you have to mind yourself so much, you can't go out and live a normal life. But you were only approached to take part in this last year, and you've already a couple of medals to your credit. And your transplant journey was hugely serious.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
I was fairly sick. It was about 2017 where I really 2016, 2017, I had my worst years. My lungs were progressively getting worse. I was born with cystic fibrosis, and then up until I was about a teenager, I was looked after in Crumlin Hospital. And then from a teenager, I moved to St. Vincent's, and from there, the cystic fibrosis team looked after me. And then when I had the transplant in 2017, I was moved to the Mater. But with cystic fibrosis, from birth, your lungs are progressively getting worse and worse, and your lung capacity keeps going down. So things get harder and harder, just doing normal stuff, climbing stairs, walking, doing sports, wasn't really...
So Victor, you had to get a double lung transplant.
Double lung transplant and heart surgery. Yeah. So I didn't have the heart transplant, but I had heart surgery. When they were testing for the lung transplant, they found out I had a heart defect that they didn't know about. So they kind of said, well, fix that at the same time. So I got the whole engine fixed.
Yeah.
So what sport did you end up doing, and what did you medal for?
So I had a previous history of archery, Olympic archery. I took that up when I was in college before transplant. So I was kind of playing to my strengths. Couldn't run, couldn't really kind of do aerobic exercises as such, but I've had good upper body strength. So archery really played into my kind of sports that I could do. And
a man after my own heart, I know you're a swimmer.
Yeah,
as well,
I love swimming as well. And then after the transplant, I had a lot better lung capacity, and I had more kind of endurance. And I took up the swimming. I was doing it before transplant, but now I could do it more often, and I could do it for longer. And I took up, I did the 50-metre freestyle.
Yeah.
I like the sprinting. So I haven't got up to your standard long distance yet.
You'll get there.
You won't be doing a Daniel Whiffen in the Seine anytime soon.
No.
Yeah.
And he won a gold medal in darts. He bottled a dartboard in a well-known supermarket a few weeks beforehand and practiced.
That's incredible.
He's selling himself short.
Oh my God.
He won the gold medal.
These are the actual medals. We have them there in the tables in front of us. Now, these this year for the Games are actually sustainable medals. Mike, tell us about them.
Well, all I know about the medals is that they're made out of potato, corn, sugarcane and organic beetroot. So they're meant to taste good, but I haven't tried them. But they're actually very lovely medals. They're unique medals, like these ones now from the British Games that we won a week later. They're the normal kind of medals, but they're very nice. I mean, they're very tastefully done and...
Tastefully done, see what you did there.
I must say, when I met it, I really like looking at them. They're fantastic, and they've been well earned, to be honest with you, and we love what we do.
Yeah.
We love what we do.
Lads, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Do you know what? I'm so proud of you, because what you've been through with your health difficulties, your journeys, the trauma of transplant, and doing this to raise awareness is amazing as well, and doing all what you're doing as well.
Can I just say one thing?
You can, of course.
Could I just pay tribute to Orla Hogan-Ryan, who was a team member, much loved, like a sister, who passed away about 11 days ago. She was the backbone of the team. She was an inspiration to everybody. And we hope her family, the Ryans and the Hogans and Nina, take comfort in the fact that the transplant team will never forget them.
No.
We'll never forget Orla. And we just want to thank Orla for being Orla.
Lovely thing to do.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
May her
very much.
gentle soul rest in peace. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, anyone interested in joining Transplant Sport Ireland even, check out the website on transplantsportireland.ie.
Now, after the break, you can't beat the classics, which is why we're having bacon and pineapple. Oh, sounds delicious in the kitchen. Cabbage maybe as well. We'll see in a few. So... Fáilte Rash, welcome back to Ireland AM. Now, we love a traditional Irish lunch here on the show, which is why for this morning's cookery, we're going for the classic combo of bacon and pineapple. Yes, Tommy Butler from the Johnstown estate, all the way in Cúnta Kildara, is that right? Sinead.
Yep.
Tommy, right, this sounds delish. Let's get started.
Bacon and pineapple. Why? What's wrong with this man with his pineapple and his bacon? So we're used to eating pork and apple, kind of a classic. Yeah, so pork goes really well with all types of fruits, and pears, apples, pineapples, pomegranates, anything fruit-based, pork goes really well with. So again, I wanted to do something kind of different today. I was looking at the pork chop and I was like, sure, bacon doesn't get... Like, people are sitting down there now having their rashers and that's bacon to a lot of people, and they'll have the bacon and cabbage and stuff. But, you know, like the gammon steak has kind of gone out of fashion a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, touch, yeah. I think it's a big English thing in the UK. So, yeah, I wanted to do a little nod to that. So I'm going to actually start with the relish, yeah. So...
But the Irish still love their, like, the bacon and cabbage or the rashers in the morning.
100%, yeah.
I mean, we've grown up with it, haven't we?
Absolutely, yes. Bread and butter, literally. So, yeah, I'm going to start with the relish, right? So, because I want to get this cooking, right? So, a little pan here, bit of oil, a little bit of butter, okay? I'm going to start off then by adding a little bit of red onion. I have a little bit of red onion here and a little bit of chilli, okay?
Tommy, what heat have we got that at now?
It's about a medium heat.
Okay.
So a little bit of heat, it'll cool down. Once you add the ingredients to a pan like that, they tend to kind of come down quite quickly. And
what are you adding in there now?
A little bit of red pepper in there, okay? So just like that. Next, I'm going to add a touch of mustard.
Is that Dijon?
Whole grain mustard. That's it's a beautiful brand. Actually, it's Lakeshore mustard. I have that at home all the time.
That's an Irish one, is it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Give that a little bit of stir. I have a little bit of garlic powder here, touching that. A little bit of curry powder, just a small bit in, depending on how you like the curry, and a touch of nutmeg in.
Okay, curry, because there's a lot gone in there now. Will that run through you?
Not at all. No. We're going to cook it out. Right. So that cooks away there, right? Then when you get a little bit of heat on that, you drop in your pineapple. So I've kind of diced pineapple here. Well, that goes in there just like that.
Now, Tommy, why have you chosen pineapple? Tell us at home why.
Because I think pineapple is a little bit quirkier. It has a nice sharpness to the pork or the bacon when you're cooking it, you know. I think apple is fine. Everyone's used to apple. You can make an apple relish just as much. You can make a pear relish. You could make anything you want, really. But I think the pineapple has a nice tartness, a nice kind of, you know, when you eat pineapple, you get that little kick of bitterness and sweetness.
But you get sweetness as well, right?
Exactly. So that works quite well. To this, you could add vinegar to this, but I'm going to add lime because it's fruit. So I'm going to squeeze a lime to this, just like that.
So this is the perfect hangover cure now for anyone coming back from EP tomorrow.
Yeah, true. Then I'm going to add a touch of honey. You could add sugar or you could add vinegar, but I want to go a little bit more natural. I just want to add natural fruits to the dish, so you're keeping all the fruit elements together. And then you literally just let that go and you let that boil away and it'll come down. And what you're left with then is a really nice kind of relish like this. At the end,
that's beautiful.
A little bit of chopped coriander. So you can see the colour difference.
Yeah.
You draw out the sweetness, all the juices come out of the fruits, the natural sugars come in. They caramelise and you get this beautiful, soft, it's delicious. You could have it, you could just eat it like that. You could use it as a dessert. It's delicious.
How long would you leave that in the pot for, by the way?
About 8 to 9 minutes. I had it on boiling for a while, like kind of on a medium simmer.
Yeah.
You'll see it change colour, keep it stirring it, keep tasting it. Yeah. Might need some more sugar, you might like a little bit more vinegar, depends how you like your food.
Exactly.
But yeah, nothing crazy. And again, it's a relish, so a chutney you cook down until a chutney is cooked till it's very soft. And like you need a bit of texture with this, so there's still a touch of bite in the pineapple as well.
Yeah, a little bit of a crunch in it.
A little bit of crunch. Now, to the bacon itself. So again, I've got a bacon basic bacon chop here.
That's a
There's
good
a mouthful.
thick piece of bacon, right?
Right here.
Look at that. So obviously, down to the local butchers, support Irish, support local.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Wherever your local butcher is, rub it in a bit of oil. That's it. Nice green, medium grill pan again.
I mean, it's almost like a chop, isn't it?
Straight on. It's a chop, no matter what way you look at it.
Bacon chop.
It's a bacon chop.
Okay. You can obviously get bacon
chops.
chops, so just ask your butcher for a bacon chop.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
They'll cut it off for you. Again, can do medallions for you. It depends again what you like. You could use a gammon steak. Again, it's more the actual dish I'm concerned of, you know. So you put your bacon in, and then what I find helps is if you have a plate or a pan or something, if you just press it down a bit, you get the nice even bar marks on the actual bacon.
From the pan.
Yeah, yeah. So
that's clever.
I mean, a good press down. And again, this is bacon. I've put this in some water overnight because again it's bacon spice, so you don't need to season this. I'm going to use the same spices as the seasening for this in the dish.
Tommy, go back to there. You said you put it in water overnight. You soaked it, is it?
Kind of soak it. Yeah.
Okay, why so?
Because it draws out the water, it settles it a little bit. You know, because if you leave it there too long, it can be quite salty. It's not very nice eating, and you've got really salty.
So just leave it in a bowl overnight out on
Leave it in a bowl overnight, like you would for Christmas with your ham.
Okay, same thing, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it depends where you get your bacon. If it's a really rare breed kind of style bacon or pork, then it'll be probably quite natural. Then you want to leave that then for a couple of minutes until you get a nice kind of bar mark.
And again, that's a medium to high heat on that, Tommy.
Again, medium to high, not too much. Again, this is a perfect barbecue dish as well for this time of year. So I was thinking light, summery, you know, what's going to work well this time of year. So again, you make your little bar mark on that. You see now, you can see the pineapple is starting to starting to slowly change colour here. Like that's exactly what you want. Now from here, I'm just going to flip this over, all right? Now, so you can see again, a little bit caught for time. So we have our pineapple here. So I'm going to spice this up now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of the garlic powder, a little bit of the nutmeg, and a touch of the curry powder. And then I'm going to actually glaze it with some honey.
Lovely.
So this is a nice way to actually inject the flavour without, you know, you don't want to burn it either then.
Yeah.
So, and then what you left, that goes into the oven then for about 6 to 8 minutes. Kind of this is about 170 roughly. And then what you're left with.
Oh, that looks delicious, Tommy.
Is this bad boy.
Very nice.
It is delicious.
We've 1 minute left on this,
No
Tommy.
problem
Lovely.
at all. But then just give it a little bit, make sure you get all those flavours.
They're telling me to let me eat it. I'm a hungry boy now. I was out.
Right.
I was out.
Saying, give me some food.
The field last night till about half two.
Here, so
3.
what I have here, and I will actually put some relish on it, of course.
That's really, and that's glazed both sides with the honey.
That's glazed both sides with the honey.
Ah,
yeah,
Tommy, that's beautiful. Do you have bees on site, by the way, down Johnstown Estate?
Not yet.
Not yet. You're working on it.
That's it. One step at a time.
Ah, here, we'll have a taste of this now. Ah, look at this
baby
now.
apples
I'm a
as well,
hungry
a little
man.
pink peppercorn for some natural sweetness.
We'll have a little tasting here now. That's beautiful, Tommy.
Yeah, tender.
Yeah, lovely crunch in the
salty.
Lovely crunch. Yeah, and it's actually still quite salty, no? Yeah. Even though you drew you steeped in the water overnight.
Leave it for longer. It depends how long, you know.
Ah, here, great. And you serve that up in the menu.
It depends, yeah, but that was special sometimes, yeah, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So,
if you were to head down to EP, you'd be serving this up right now, yeah?
absolutely, yeah. The chefs will kill me. Don't say anything.
Absolutely delicious. You can find details. Sorry to want to top my mouthful. Up on our website, or you can find out more from Tommy down at Johnstown Estate in Enfield. Up next, what exactly is it about Kylie that's seen her top the charts for over 40 years? We're looking at the career of the Princess of Pop in just a few minutes' time. This is Delish Tommy. Oh, Gurmila.
You're very welcome back to Ireland AM. Now, there won't be a true pop queen or king to be found anywhere across the country tonight as Stradbally turns pink to welcome the Princess of Pop to the electric picnic stage.
But what is it about the enduring legacy of Kylie Minogue, and why has her career lasted 40 years in an industry obsessed with the next new thing?
Now, before we speak to music consultant and commentator Dee Reddy and Owen Murphy from the Communications Clinic, here's a look at why the world is obsessed with Kylie. Well, what a legend. And
Wow.
lads, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I've got a EP FOMO. You're going down to see Kylie. I presume you are as well, are you?
I am, indeed.
Oh, she's got a wristband.
Been and gone.
Owen, will you be going down?
No, I'm going to stay at home and mind my children while my wife goes to.
Well, hey, that's what
Go
you
on,
need to do.
Melanie.
But listen, you've interviewed the great and the good of the music industry over the last 20, 30 years. I mean, what is it about Kylie that has given her such longevity in a world of pop, which you don't often see?
I think she kind of took control of her own narrative. I think that was the most important thing she did. And when you look, I suppose, from where she came from, and she came from that Stock Aitken Waterman stable of artists where it was just this conveyor belt churning out bubblegum pop. And she kind of quickly realised that while it was making her a household name, it wasn't where she wanted to be. And I think when she managed to separate herself from their kind of clutches and reinvent herself, I think that's when she kind of understood who she was and where she wanted to go. And I think really for me it was the Michael Hutchinson experience and the Michael Hutchinson's year where she kind of understood the double-edged sword that is celebrity and fame. And I think she'd been riding high on that crest for so long that obviously the press almost kind of turned on them as this kind of toxic pop culture rock relationship, and she was badly burned by it, and she's never gone back on the back of it. Like she's ultimately, her private life has remained her private life after that moment. And I think anyone who's watched Mystify, which is that documentary of Michael Hutchinson, you can see they really did have a very tender, loving relationship. It obviously, as unfortunately most things happen with Michael Hutchinson, it ended in flames. But I do think that has almost shaped her
seminal moment of her career, yeah.
Yeah, but with the media and with the public ever since.
I think Owen hit it, the nail on the head there when he said she's reinvented herself, because that's what she's done since the 80s. She's nearly 40 years at it now.
And she's done everything. Like, she's done, obviously, pop, which is what she's known for. She's done a country album. She has a disco album. But you really hit the nail on the head there when you said when she took control of her own narrative. Because I think what's so interesting about her early career, if you think of, like, the
Neighbours, for once.
Neighbours, with the releases with Jason Donovan, then she was with Stock Aitken Waterman, then she had obviously the Michael Hutchins relationship, she had the Nick Cave collaboration. For a long time in her early career, I think the media kind of insisted on defining her by the men that she worked with, or she was romantically linked with, or both. And it was really when she actually went out completely on her own and just carved this path for herself. And that's when I think she really, really built this sort of iconic status, and it's given her the resonance that she has today.
And I think when you look at reinvention, she's one of those few artists who's managed to understand the point of being a brand in the music industry. And as the music industry has changed so much and away from albums and around that kind of 360 merchandising appearance where you have to have the tour, you have to have the merchandise, she pumps out 7 million bottles of wine and makes 10 million.
And it's the only celebrity brand wine I drink, other than Graham Norton's now, to be fair.
But she's realised that, you know. And when you're going toe to toe with Kylie Jenner,
but not only does she know her brand, she also knows her audience. Absolutely, so I mean, the LGBTQIA plus audience is her bread and butter, so to speak.
Yeah, and like this is a woman who has always shied away from any sort of political controversy. She understands that road exists if you want to be a Bono, but she's always shied away from that. The only time she's ever really spoken out is when they went to the polls in Australia for the gay marriage referendum. And she came out and she supported it. And she's always been there for her fan base.
She knows her tribe.
She does absolutely that, yeah. And like, that's a very difficult tightrope act to walk. And she's done it skillfully and artfully.
She almost does it the same way that Dolly Parton does.
Yeah,
that sort of, she's present, people know that they have her support, but she doesn't feel the need to, I guess, put other people off by being really outspoken about stuff.
But apart from her music, I mean, I would be the first to admit she doesn't have the best voice in the universe for someone with a 4-decade-long career, really.
Well, I disagree here now.
To the charts recently.
What? Voice.
She's incredible.
Listen, don't kill me now.
It's your birthday.
I'm just saying,
live without a studio backing.
Have a try of one of her songs in karaoke, and I promise you'll realise how good her voice is.
If you compare, for example, to some of the Celine Dions of the world and the Adeles of the world, people like that.
You had a Crazy Frog getting #1 for how many weeks? But music has changed, and I think that what she provides.
I would go back to my point, which is it's not just the music. She has the whole fashion, the icon, the pop icon culture as well surrounding her. So she really is almost elevated from a brand status to a cult status nearly.
I mean, who else could buy a pair of gold shorts for 50p and then have them be put into the Victoria and Albert Museum?
Owen.
2 for 1.
2 for 1.
I'm really scared of the Kylie 5 now. We're going to come after me. I'm sorry.
I took them off earlier, actually. They were lovely.
I know, but I didn't want to frighten anyone anymore than I have to. But, like, I think you have to also remember, like, Kylie came in around at a time in an area where television was grey.
Yeah.
You know, we were at a political time, you know, you had Thatcher in the UK, you had, you know, unemployment here, the crisis in the north that was just unfortunately taking over everything here. And you had this vision of Erinsborough, which was, you know, sunshine and beach, and they were these beautiful, beautiful people. We were watching Glenroe.
Yeah, true.
Genuinely, before this came around.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were drawing in 20 million viewers. At its peak, the X Factor on a Saturday night just about reached 20 million. They were doing it on a weekday night at 5:30.
Dee, she obviously went through her health scare then as well. So she's really taken us on this roller coaster of a ride throughout her career.
Absolutely, and I mean the health scare was, I mean, that was more than a health scare. She was ill. You know?
Was.
Yeah.
And she was meant to do the Glastonbury Legend stage that year that she fell ill, and then she fell ill and she had to cancel it. But when she came back and
what a
did
comeback!
That's actually, I think, the most watched Glastonbury set of all time, for people watching back on it. I've watched it numerous times. It's absolutely brilliant. And I think you are right, though, about her voice. Like, she doesn't have the strongest voice in the world, but it's a really sweet voice.
I mean, but she entertains.
But she is unbelievable.
When I say that she's, I need to redeem myself here now, but like, speaking of voice, you've Madonna, who's that sort of brand as well.
Yeah.
Not known for their absolutely massive soprano high notes, but they take what they have, use it to the max, and actually create this massive noise around themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at Glastonbury, you look at headlining Electric Liquor, that's no mean feat.
No, it's not. And that set at Glastonbury, I mean, there's a reason they call it the Legend set. The only other one, I think, that has the same kind of resonance is actually Dolly Parton's one.
Yeah. Okay, so you're looking forward to tonight. You're
wait.
staying at home having tea and cake.
Absolutely.
Looking
Just
after
tea,
the kids.
just
I'll
tea.
be in bed early because I'm old.
All right, and I'll be down there with you, so we'll see you there. Dee, right, party time. All right, still to come. We're catching up with former President Mary Robinson, and we're stealing the style of Emily in Paris. We'll see you back in a few. Right, get your bag.
Now let's have a final check on your Sunday paper, starting with the front page of the Sunday Independent. Its headline reads, O'Gorman to resist legal bid by survivors of baby homes. It goes on to report that Children's Minister Roderick O'Gorman will contest a series of legal challenges taken by former mother and baby home residents aimed at forcing the government to broaden eligibility of the redress scheme for survivors.
Onto the front page of the Business Post next this morning, and it leads with Bank of Ireland faces battle over €500 million crash-era pension curbs. It writes that Bank of Ireland has rejected calls to lift crisis-era curbs that significantly restricted the pension benefits of more than 5,000 former staff in a deepening row over more than €500 million.
The Sunday Times leads with risk of attack by right-wing extremists in Ireland is substantial. It reports that the Garda Commissioner, Drew Harris, has increased the threat level posed by violent political extremists from moderate to substantial, meaning that an attack is likely following an upsurge in threats to kill members of the government and opposition parties by far-right extremists.
Onto the tabloids next, and the Irish Mail on Sunday leads with priest stabbing accused has ISIS mindset. The paper writes that a teenager appeared in court yesterday charged in connection with the stabbing of army chaplain in Galway City.
The Irish Sunday Mirror opens with boy charged over priest stabbing. It reports that the teen was charged with assault causing harm to Father Paul Murphy, who was injured in Renmore Barracks in County Galway on Thursday.
The Sunday World puts cartels jail bait on its front page. It writes that 3 cartel hitmen and the Kinahan's top man in Portlaoise prison joined forces to dole out a savage beating to a violent criminal in a day of chaos at the high security lockup.
And the Sun on Sunday opens with Barry and Sabrina love split. The paper writes that pop star Sabrina Carpenter has broken up with Barry Keoghan after becoming fed up with his party lifestyle. Now, after the break, former President Mary Robinson gives her opinion on the US election. All that and very much more in a candid interview. That's next.
Walter Rash, welcome back to Ireland Day. Where's your cake on?
I ate it all. It's in my belly.
All right, she enjoyed it too. Anyway, a reforming constitutional lawyer and a senator in her early career, Mary Robinson detonated an electoral earthquake by winning the Irish presidential vote all the way back in 1990.
And since then, she's continued to fight the good fight, becoming the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, and is currently a champion for climate justice as chair of the Elders. Ahead of the release of Mrs. Robinson, a fascinating new documentary on her extraordinary career, I sat down with the former president.
I remember spending a lot of time looking out this window. I would look out on the river from my bedroom and dream dreams. There were dreams about making life fairer.
There comes a time where an individual has to take a stand and be prepared to pay a price for taking that stand.
The Emerald Isle has its first woman president.
The women of Ireland who, instead of rocking the cradle, rocked the system.
Decided to name Mrs. Mary Robinson High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Mary Robinson, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
I watched the documentary last night, and I have to say, for the first few minutes, I was laughing out loud for some of the instances of it because it showed a side to you I wasn't really experiencing. Apparently, you're great crack. You party as much as you work. And I particularly loved the moment when you spoke about holding your grandson Rory in your arms and how it changed something in you. Can you bring us back to that moment?
Yes, I remember it very vividly because obviously he was the first grandchild. And somehow I had this reaction. I had been talking about 2050, and I said, he'll be 47 in 2050. He'll have his whole life ahead of him. You know, that's what I was thinking. And therefore, it kind of motivated me to think, you know, I must do more for all of those who are being born and going to be living through this century in a way I won't be, because we have a climate and nature crisis, which is very serious. But on the other hand, we have a possibility of a much better world, a world of renewable energy, much healthier, much fairer, etc. So we must be positive and work towards that world. But he, you know, very much inspired me to think in a future way that I wasn't thinking as much.
I suppose you've lived through many of the positives in our society, particularly when it comes to the advancement of women and equality. It's when I talk to people younger than me now, it's hard for them to imagine things like homosexuality were illegal. Even things like the women in the home, you weren't allowed work, the marriage ban. It's absolutely astounding. So do you think, looking back in the bad old days of John Charles McQuaid and the theocracy that we did have, that going forward we can wrench ourselves back from the negativity that's so profound at the moment?
Well, I think the film is important in showing the progress that was made, especially in this country. I didn't particularly want to make it, but Bride Rosalie, my dear friend, persuaded me, and of course it's dedicated to her. But I think it does illustrate, you know, the kind of progress that we have made. But we should also know, and that's why I think Aoife, the director, was absolutely right to also cover a bit of the United States, where it's going backwards for women in many states in the United States under bad leadership. So you can't guarantee that things will remain forward. You've got to be constantly vigilant to make sure that we do hold on. And then you mentioned you know, the attacks on women in public life, which are disproportionate to attacks on male politicians, for example. We have to somehow get hold of that and you know, put in the right controls so it doesn't continue to be a problem for women, because we need more women in public life. We need more young people willing to, you know, be engaged and get involved.
Yeah. You were never afraid, actually, to say what you felt and feck the diplomacy, excuse my terminology there, but you had to tell some very harsh truths to people who normally, they wouldn't have done it. Someone else in your position would have been more reticent, I think. So, but there were consequences to that along the way as well. Is there any regrets that you have, looking back on actions you've done, that you would have done differently?
Well, I know that because I was very outspoken as High Commissioner for Human Rights, that you know, the United States, for example, didn't want me to continue because I was critical of the Bush administration and what they had done post 9/11. But you know, it was important to do the job, not to keep the job, as I said. And I was happy to move on to a different way of dealing with human rights and now doing it through climate justice.
Yeah, climate justice as well. I mean, when you see a lot of very powerful people in the world denying that climate change exists, they're not listening to scientists, they're playing to the populist opinion of, of so many people who are getting their information from social media, they're not getting it from verified sources, they're not listening to both sides. It's almost like the propaganda machine of Nazi Germany is in full force, but in a different medium now. How can you convince people like that who won't listen?
I think that's a very important point, because we're actually seeing worse now. We're seeing that it's driving people, the algorithms are driving people to the kind of dark side and to become more violent. We're seeing it in the United Kingdom and in Belfast in recent times, being affected by these algorithms of social media. We need to get on top of that. We need to realise and stop having hate speech on platforms for far too long, etc. And we need more controls. We have to have regulations by governments that hold social media to account. We need freedom of expression, of course. As a human rights person, I believe in that. But when you're in a theatre, you don't shout fire. I mean, that was the old story of what you don't do. These algorithms are shouting fire, go get out into the street and throw rocks, and it's really very serious because we need rule of law. We need a civilised society so that we can all prosper, and we mustn't let that be undermined by anonymous, unaccountable voices getting in people's ear, and, as I say, driving them to be more angry, and then more frustrated, and then more violent.
And it's quite sad when you see that happening to a place like Ireland. I suppose traditionally we would have liked to have thought we're very welcoming, we're very loving, we're very open people, with the diaspora is absolutely enormous throughout the world. What would you say to Irish people now who are feeling quite threatened, and they're acting out against refugees coming to this country on a massive level?
Yeah, I think we need to talk a lot more about what it is to be a migrant, to remember our history, to remember our famine and the dispersal of our people, to remember how we've gathered that in now with the Irish diaspora, and we're connected in a way we weren't before that light in the window helped to shape that Irish diaspora. But we also have to know that it's migrants who are the bravest of the brave. They've left their country to try and make a new life and then send money back to help those left at home. That's what migrants do. They send a whole lot of money back home to those at home because they've had some opportunity. We should embrace the fact that, this is part of humanity, it's part of living, and actually it's going to be worsened by this climate and nature crisis. It drives people on top of conflict, and we've too many conflicts in our world. So we need young people to be inspired to get active and to believe in our core values, which are still the same values of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we have to live in accordance to those values, and we'll have a better world.
A female daughter of migrants, of course, that could possibly be the next president in the States, so that could maybe be a good thing.
Yes, I'm very much hoping that Kamala Harris will be the next president, because it's so important not just to have a woman president, but to have not to have, again, a very bad president who did so much harm and who would do even more harm, probably, if he got the opportunity.
Mary Robinson, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Pleasure, thank you. I suppose I would like to be remembered as somebody who saw the need for change during her life and tried to make as much change as possible.
Beautiful interview there. You can catch Mrs. Robinson at cinemas nationwide this Friday. Elaine, like 34 years on now since her inauguration, she's still fighting the good fight, isn't she?
Oh, she's an absolutely incredible woman, because I just remember when she won the presidential election in the first place in 1990, and I was like, oh my God, sitting and watching the 6 o'clock news going, this is amazing, because as a young girl, I knew what a seminal moment it was. And when you interview somebody like that, and you can see what she's done all around the world, and she's still in her 80s trying to make the world a better place, it puts a lot of leaders in the world to shame. And she's very conscious of a feminist agenda is needed to kind of fix the wrongs that we have in the world at the moment, and I think she's right. I mean, she says feminist agenda. It's not excluding men. It's just that men and women should have equal say in everything that's going on in the world, and hopefully it might turn things around because of it. It's looking a bit grim at the moment, really.
Yeah, and obviously the Mary Robinson Centre, I think it's opening up in Ballina now in County Mayo on the banks of the River Moy.
She's the light that she had in Phoenix Park in Arsenukteron. She's the window. She's moved that light to the centre there, which I think is lovely in Mayo. So it's a lovely tribute.
It is a lovely tribute, and obviously we work with her son Aubrey as well. So in the news, so it's fantastic.
And listen, you probably can tell by that I was fangirling ridiculously.
You were.
Like, I was. Like, you could give me Brad Pitt could be sitting on my lap, and I wouldn't give a damn. But when you meet someone like Mary Robinson, and it's just what she's achieved in her life, it's just absolutely incredible. A true superstar.
Absolutely.
And very giving of her time and very giving of her energy, even now, to try and just make the world a better place.
That's a lovely birthday treat for you. Anyway, after the break, we look ahead to the best on the telly this week, including a sneak peek into the biggest cruise ship in the world. We'll see you back in 3. Now, beautiful interview. Love that. Walter Rash, welcome back to Ireland Game with me. And her name is Rose, actually. It's not Elaine at all. It's Rose. Anyway, there's something for everyone.
Speaking of which.
Up on our screens this week from Football Insiders to Me Too thrillers to a documentary about the biggest cruise ship in the world.
But of course, we would be remiss not to start with the talk of the town. This year's Rose of Tralee festivities, and the rose in all our hearts. Killian O'Sullivan joins us on the show today.
I bet you the name is Wilted Rose they're going to put across the screen or something. There's always some little kick there in the lower third.
I'm more of a prickly rose, so there you go.
I think, look, this is what it is. It's something that, of all the audience that will watch it, and a lot will watch it, some will watch it for love and some will hate watch it. But probably all of them will watch it with Twitter in the other hand and tweeting alongside. And we're all hoping for a breakdancing Rose or a rapping Rose or for something. We're all looking for that, magic moment that can be born out of a show like this.
I mean, I love when Dahi reels all the names off at the end. He's a great memory, in all fairness to him.
Bless him, yeah. It's probably with a little bit of help from an auto cue. But nevertheless, Dahi is just perfect for a job like this. If there is crack to be extracted from a person, no better man than Dahi O'Shea to get it. He is just made for a role like this because he can make people feel so at ease. Within seconds of being in his company, you already can feel yourself coming out of your shell.
And obviously Catherine Thomas is with them.
Catherine Thomas as well this year as well. They have a lot of girls to get through the interview stages. This, they are very adamant in saying, is not a beauty pageant. This is not based on looks. This is based on personality and characteristics. That
generally sound person competition.
Yeah. It is the lovely lady competition. It really is.
Yeah.
But in a world where a lot of competitions suffer backlash for various reasons from various sides of the internet, it's kind of lovely that this is, still exists in the way that it does. It hasn't changed, and I hope will never change for many more years.
I could see Elaine now as the Cork Rose, the new 2 Pothouse Rose. What do you think?
I think if there was a Rose of Tralee After Dark, and Elaine could say,
that sounds really dodgy.
Like that. I just mean like the unfiltered Elaine.
Yeah, I don't think I would have made it past the qualifying.
What would be your talent?
I will pass on that.
You'll pass on that one.
We'll pass on that one. Our beautiful duet singing voice. You'd be great at hosting, and I can see you doing a Dahi on it.
Yeah, well, I escorted 2 years down there.
Did you?
Yes, Fado, yeah, when I was a young fella, yeah. And it was great crack. Like, you honestly now, you need the stamina of a young bull. That's
you
what
had
you.
the
Well, not anymore, but I had.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. To keep going because it's a full week of it like.
And they all lose their voice by the last night as well. I say the crack is mighty. And don't I'm sick of people giving out about it. I mean, it's an Irish institution. If you don't like it, don't watch it and stop giving out.
It's as easy.
Doing you no harm.
Yeah. And if you do like it, if you want to watch it, it's going to be on RTE1 tomorrow from 8 o'clock. The interview stages.
Yes, and there's lots of romances go on behind the scenes as well.
I'm sure there is.
There is a reality show.
You could call it budding romance.
Oh, very good.
See what you did there.
Like that. Right. Next up, the world's biggest cruise ship, Channel 4 tonight, 8 o'clock.
Icon of the Seas is an absolute beast of a ship. It's about 5 times the size of the Titanic. It can take over 7,000 people with crew and guests. It cost $2 billion to build. It is just unbelievable. The biggest, most luxurious cruise ship to sail the seas. It's got seven swimming pools, so one for each day of the week. This is what you're seeing now is the largest ever glass and steel structure that was hoisted onto a floating vessel. It is breaking records left, right and centre. It's got water parks. It is just got everything. If you've never done a cruise, and I mean, if you do this cruise, then you could never do any other cruise because they would all be crap by comparison. But this is just an absolute, like, leading class world first.
What have they got in there? I know they've got an ice skating rink.
Oh, it's ridiculous. They literally have everything. They've got
like a mini city.
And when you're on a cruise ship, if you've ever been onto one of the big cruise ships, when you're like, you're not rocking. It's not like rocking the boat down. There's like proper shopping and there's every type of different pub and bar, and in the evening there's cabaret shows. There's like various nightlife, whatever holiday you want to get out of a cruise ship. I feel like I'm here. This is going to be sponsored by some cruise liners. It's not. I just went on a cruise last year for the first time ever and really enjoyed it. And then I'm looking at this and I'm seeing how incredible it is. Now, you can get
like, got a stone though if you're on a cruise.
You can get basic rooms, but then you can also get what look like luxury penthouse apartments with grand pianos and everything in it. This is, watch this documentary because it's just a glimpse into
when
how
I
people
went
have
on
live.
a cruise and it was precursor to the icon of the seas, my room was about the size of the couch. So they can get that small.
They can, and also we did the cruise and we didn't spring for a window because I was like, don't need a window in our room.
Oh no, you do need a window.
Yeah, I know.
No,
yeah,
you do, because cabin fever.
That's
where it comes from.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Rose. Okay, enough of the Rose now, Derek.
Oh my God, Jack and Rose. There you go.
So that's Channel 4 tonight at 8 o'clock if you fancy watching that.
Now next we have Mission to Burnley.
Mission to Burnley. So this is about a look at the up-and-coming scrappy football team who found themselves in the Premier League, not by accident. And it's the trials and tribulations. This is an Access All Areas documentary. We've seen this type of documentary really become more popular with the Drive to Survive series on Netflix. And there's tennis version, Welcome to Wrexham. And it's kind of, it is, although it is about football, it's not, you don't have to be into football to be into a documentary like this. This is more about the drama behind the scenes. And they don't need to orchestrate any drama, and drama just unfolds because you've got this American owner and you've got this, the coach who's come in, and you've got the manager and all these big voices who all have an opinion as to how things should be done and the way things should be done. And it all comes together, and it's either euphoric when they win or it's
the pits.
Yeah, horrific when they don't.
Cinemas now Blink Twice. It's out on Friday. Tell us about that.
Zoe Kravitz, who is the daughter of Lenny Kravitz, I'm sure she hates that I reference her as that, but she doesn't watch the show, so it's okay. She was, of course, Catwoman in The Batman, and this is her directorial debut, and by all accounts is getting rave reviews. It's meant to be really well put together. Channing Tatum plays a billionaire who has a private island, and after this one night on the town, this girl finds herself invited back to this island with all of these very interesting characters, shall we say. So it's Agatha Christie-esque because there is drama unfold. So we're introduced to our cast of, quirky characters, and then from that, without going too spoiler heavy, things happen, and then we find ourselves trying to discover exactly how we got to where we got to in the end of the movie.
Killian, I suppose this film has been described as the Me Too version of Get Out.
In as much as, so the way Get Out, if you've seen that movie, which is kind of really leans into racial disparities, this is more sex and class as well. So it takes inspiration from that, surely as a through line, but outside of all that, this isn't pushing any sort of agendas or anything of the sort at all. This is just a really good movie, and the way the trailer is even cut together, it gives me good hope that this is going to be a really, really solid.
And you mentioned at the start that Zoe Kravitz wouldn't want to be, she's Lenny Kravitz's daughter, but I actually saw a clip of her the other day on his birthday, which was recently enough, and she's like, yes, I love being Lenny Kravitz's daughter. So she doesn't mind it at all, which is lovely for a Nepo baby, because really, normally they go, oh no, I got all my merits by myself. She's like, yes, no, I am a Nepo baby. I'm where I am, largely due to my dad and mum, and I'm appreciative of it. So it's nice.
It should be. I always think that with people who have are the generation coming after a famous parent. I would be hanging onto those coattails like I'm water skiing off the back of a speedboat, of course. That's what I'm paving the way so my little boy can do it. He'll be on doing this segment in 20 years, and if he doesn't use my name and thank me, then Alex, you'll be grounded.
Killian O'Sullivan, the TV legend, of course he's going to use that. Now, finally, we have Cuckoo in Cinemas Friday as well.
Yeah, very different. This is more of a horror-y one. This is not for the kids. This is an eerie, creepy, kind of, the way it's shot stylistically, it's kind of quite an independent looking movie. But this is, very different. This is one that if there's a late night showing, if there's a midnight showing of this somewhere, go to it, scare yourself, and then be petrified for the whole drive home. But yeah, this is a good one if you're into that kind of things. If you're not, if straight away you're allergic to the idea of that, then it's fine. This isn't for you. But if you're into the kind of spooky, scary stuff, eerie more than spooky and scary, then this is a good one.
Is any big names in it, or is it your standard kind of semi-famous people who are kind of the kind of horror types?
Exactly. It's the kind of the up-and-comers who, like one of the girls who shot to fame, I suppose, fame being relative to if you've seen Euphoria, through Euphoria.
Yeah.
So there's people who are like, their star is very much still rising, which means it gives them the opportunity to still kind of do these kind of B movies. They're not looking to get a huge box office return for this, just to make a good
cult following
movie, yeah.
Killian,
all right.
Thank you so much once again.
Good man. And Alex has got the slot when you're done, right?
The Jack to my Rose. Here we go.
There we go. Right, after the break, we're taking style inspiration from Emily in Paris. Fashion is up next. Jack and Rose, I like that. Yeah, there we go.
Welcome to the Romulus Space Station.
This place gives me the creeps.
Young?
Stop playing around, man. Just get up.
I'm not playing around. There's something in the water. Run.
Impact event in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Very welcome back to Ireland AM with a costume designer like Patricia Field, the woman behind the styles in The Devil Wears Prada and Sex and the City at the helm. All eyes are on Emily in Paris and her pals as they totter around in Manola Blahnik's under the Eiffel Tower. Now, joining us to recreate some of the style in that is our very own Emily in Ballymount, Emily O'Donnell. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. You love
Elaine.
this. You love Emily in Paris.
I do, and I've been doing fashion features for this show since the season began. And of course, season 4 is hotly anticipated, not just for the plot, but also for the style. As you mentioned there, the costumes are epic, the backgrounds are just incredible. So everyone tuned in on Thursday to see what styles would be a common theme from the previous series and also what styles would be new.
So we're taking our slot today inspired by this. So first of all, we'll take a quick look at what our first model will be showcasing, inspired by this very colourful outfit.
Yes, so this is taken from the new season, which I just saw the other night, and coloured cohorts are everywhere. As you can see, Mindy is rocking it there. It's very out there and very chic. We're seeing a lot of them come through, but I have recreated this look in a more demure way. So I've gone for a longer skirt to make it slightly more wearable, but we're still incorporating like the headpiece, the handbag, and
we've a lot of colour going on here.
Yes.
So it's all about the colour pops here.
It is. It's all about the colour pops, and polka dots particularly are dominating throughout the series. So I'm going to start with the headpiece because this is from one of Ireland's most talented designers, Sarah.
Is that a one-off?
It is a one-off.
It's a one-off designer
yes.
piece, which explains the price
and
tag.
And it's all handmade. There are over 700 pieces of material in this. So this is all handmade, hand-sewn by award-winning milliner Sarah O'Rourke. Her pieces are just so different. Sometimes we can see with headwear, a lot of them can look similar, but it's just so unique, and we are seeing an awful lot of headwear come through on Emily in Paris. All of the top looks are accessorised to the max, and I've gone for this gorgeous cohort from CompleteLook.ie. This is actually a brand new rental offering started by a great lady called Emer Mahan, and she's really bringing something fresh and different to the rental market. Brands that you wouldn't alternatively maybe have access to in Ireland, and brands that are really, really different. So she has a real point of difference, and certainly for racing and weddings, people don't really like to wear the same thing again. I don't mind it.
You wouldn't wear that twice, really. It's very, it stands out quite a lot.
So you can buy into a trend and then rent something else. So the gorgeous bag that we just had a look at there is from We Are Callow, and they are an incredible Irish design brand started by a great couple, and they just have the most incredible vegan leather offerings. So these are all plant-based leather. We're not talking PU leather, we're talking ethical, sustainable. They have a great story on their website, wearecallow.com, and this is from their new collection, and it's actually made from bamboo leather. And then we saw a gorgeous pair of heels there from Memories, who we are going to talk about now.
Now, 1 second, we'll just take a look at the look that inspired this first of all.
Yes, so this is inspired by Camille, and this is the famous scene in Emily in Paris where Camille outs the affair between Gabriel and Emily. So everyone knows this scene.
Chanel-inspired look, of course.
Of course, yes, Elaine, you're on the money. So Camille, of course, wears a lot of these tweed cohorts throughout. And what we actually saw at the press junkets this week was a lot of the cast showed up in the tweed cohorts. And I had to go straight to Memories because they are my one-stop shop for these tweed cohorts. They come in every conceivable shape and colour. They're just really wearable, and they're giving all of the Chanel vibes at a fraction of the price. And as we saw there, Camille loves to kind of stick to more neutral colours, but I had to add in the beret to add a little bit of je ne sais quoi to the look. We see the berets featured in nearly every episode. Somebody is wearing one of them, and it's a very nice way to get the Emily in Paris look. We are now seeing the pink version of the We Are Callow bags there. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Again, we have seen a bit of a turn from the bucket bags and the bucket hats that Emily wore in the first seasons, and we're now seeing all of these really cute, dainty bags, and I just thought it tied in so well with the beautiful Chanel-inspired shoes there, which are from Memories, aren't they? Memories just have an incredible selection of designer-inspired clothes, accessories and shoes, and we've brought in the heart detail with the little jumper there under, and it just looks so cute.
Now we have Emily herself inspires her next look.
We do indeed. So we have a beautiful image there of a monochrome evening wear look, and again what we see her doing is she wears a lot of black bases for evening wear, and then she adds accessories and she adds...
my God, this is wow.
Isn't it?
It takes a lot to make me almost speechless on this show, but that is absolutely...
Elaine, that makes me so happy.
Could be on the Oscars.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm going to start off with the headpiece because this is one of Saradin Design's incredible hand creations. All of the glass and the beads and the jewels that you see on that headpiece have all been placed on by an individual, hours of work, and again, we see them all rocking this incredible headwear in a ball scene. They all go to a mass ball, and this is where it's at. But the dress that you're looking at is actually a two-piece. It's got the black base, and then it's got the wrap. And we see Emily adding a lot of volumes onto her looks with these beautiful shrugs. And they're not the shrugs we wore back in the day.
They are not. That's
They
so
are
unusual.
couture. This is what complete look do really well, which we haven't seen anywhere else, is these incredible couture dresses, but at a fraction of the price to rent. And we're seeing the beautiful bag there from Callow. This is actually made from recycled apple peels, would you believe? So these are remnants from the fruit juice industry.
I'm still obsessed with the shrug.
Isn't this
Obsessed with the
incredible?
shrug.
This would take you, you could wear this to the Oscars. It is the most incredible outfit, and it's great as well that all the businesses featured are actually all Irish female-owned businesses.
Can you rent this? It's more sustainable. With
It's
something
much
like that, it's
more
a one-off.
sustainable.
So.
Exactly, and you're
Yeah.
getting access to pieces of clothing from Complete Look that you wouldn't maybe ordinarily be able to afford, which is incredible. And the beautiful shoes there that we saw are from Memories. They have lots of Manolo-inspired pieces.
Lovely. We're running out of time a little bit, so we're going to go to our last look that we're taking inspired from Emily in Paris. Now look at that. Is that leopard print or what is it?
Yes, so Emily is famed for her leopard print bomber jacket. We've seen it pop up in lots of the episodes, and we've also seen her rock bomber jackets throughout. So I think that's kind of her go-to style.
Yeah.
And it's a nice way for people to buy into the Emily in Paris look at an affordable level.
I'm so happy leopard print is back. It makes me full of joy. I may have worn a piece or two over the weekend, but I don't care. I love it.
It's back with a bang. So I'm going to start off with the gorgeous headband that we're seeing. It's, you know, synonymous with Emily in Paris. The characters actually wear these for their press and PR photo shoots, and this one is from We Are Callow, and it's super affordable. And I've started with a cute little black bow in the back to add on that French vibe.
Oh, the bow at the back of the head is lovely, isn't it?
Isn't it so cute? We're just adding all those little details to really elevate the looks. But the centerpiece of this look has to be the bomber jacket. It comes in lots of different shapes, styles. It is from Memories. It's just really, really nice. You could wear this with so many different things. I've started with a J'adore t-shirt. Natalia's going to give us a little look at there. It is inspired, of course, by Christian Dior, as are the shoes, which are really just incredible. We've seen a lot of fancy footwear.
We have. We like the
You'd
fancy
like
footwear.
those.
I'm not allowed to buy any more shoes. I have to behave myself. Wow, they're fabulous.
And Natalia's going to show us the t-shirt there. And again, the fringe skirt is just all about the French vibes. We're seeing a lot of fringing. What we have seen throughout the series is a lot of texture. It's all about fringing. It's all about voluminous shoulders. So we're going extra to get the look, but you can do so affordably if you shop correctly.
Thank you so much for your expertise, Emily in Ballymount. Now, earlier, we made some bacon with pineapple relish. Here's how we did it.
Grill your bacon chop on a pan or char grill, leaving to colour nicely before brushing with honey and mustard. Sauté your red onions in a pan, then add red chilli, pineapple and vinegar. To assemble, place some sautéed potatoes on the base of the plate, then layer with pineapple relish and finally your bacon chop on top to serve.
Coming up tomorrow, Olympic bronze medalists Philip Doyle and Darragh Lynch are stopping by.
What's it like writing for Marvel? Well, award-winning author Sarah Rees-Brennan tells all.
And we're curling up with some kittens looking for a home.
Now, I love that fashion, by the way. It was gorgeous.
Stunning,
wow.
wasn't it?
Wow.
OK, all of that plus sweet and sticky pork belly in the kitchen, as well as all the new sport and weather you will be waking up to tomorrow from 7 bells.
Yes, now, lots of texts coming in just in relation to our transplant guests earlier on. Adrian says those people should be very, very proud, not forgetting all the other Irish athletes, but each of you is an inspiration to Ireland. We should be so proud of each and every one of them.
A lot of texts about Kylie Minogue as well, of course. She's on the main stage tonight in Electric Picnic. Letty says, I wasn't able to get tickets this year. I'm devastated. I'll be there in spirit. Hopefully, I'll see her live soon.
Mary Robinson. Mary says, good morning, guys. Great interview with Mary Robinson. Elaine, I met her once as a lady. Looking forward to seeing her and looking forward to seeing the documentary. She was a great president.
She's an absolutely amazing woman. And also another Kylie one. I've loved Kylie since my mum introduced me to her music. I'm excited to hear it tonight. The hype is real. That's it.
Oh, I wish you were coming for your birthday.
I'm going home to bed. I'm going for snooze. I'm exhausted. Thank you for all the birthday wishes. Take care.
See you tomorrow. Slán.